of data types and variables, more or less. What I would like you to do is I want you to write a program that will display the perimeter in the area of a rectangle. And so the actual requirements for this are you are going to need to create 4 variables of the type double. You are going to need to create a variable to store the width of the rectangle, a variable to store the height of the rectangle, a variable to store the perimeter of the rectangle, and a variable to store the area of the rectangle. We would understand how to create variables and then also how to initialize and assign variables by now using the assignment operator. But the first thing we need to do is create the variables. So you need to have 4 variables of type double. You are going to need a create a C project, which we'll get to in a second. But also the program needs to perform some calculations. We have not actually learned how to do calculation yet because we have not talked about operators. So I'm going to give this code to you. It's pretty simple to create calculations in a C program. You just use operators like mathematical operators. So for example, in C, if you want to add 2 variables together, use a plus. If you want to multiply 2 variables against one another, you use an asterisk. And so to calculate the perimeter of a rectangle, you need to have actually add the height of and the width and the multiply that by 2. It's very easy to do. Like I said, I will give you this code. The main focus of this challenge is for you to understand how to create variables, how to use them, and how to define data types. Area is also going to need to include a calculations. Here you are just going to multiply the width times the height using the asterisk. I didn't want to just create a simple challenge that didn't make sense. So I wanted to make it more relatable. And so I thought a rectangle perimeter and area that's pretty good, has some calculations in it, but you don't have to worry about that. So also what you need as the output for this program is you are going to display the height, the width, and the perimeter variables in the correct format. And so the other thing that you are going to learn through this challenge is how to use a print function to display the value of variables. So you are going to need to understand format specifier. You are going to understand an escape sequence for the next lesson. So you print out line speeds. So the first display should be the perimeter. The second display should be the area with the height and the width as well. So for some tips for this assignment or hints, you are going to need to create a project in CodeBlocks. You should use a meaningful name for this project. You can also create a project in Visual Studio Code and or any other IDE, since this project in this program is basically creating the perimeter and area of a rectangle. You could name the project rectangle. That's really the simplest thing. When you create the project in CodeBlocks, remember that by default, the CodeBlocks is automatically going to create a C source file for you. It's going to be named main.c. You can go ahead and use that for this project. You don't need to delete it. In our first challenge, we deleted it because I wanted to make sure you know how to create your own C file, source file. But in this, use the advantage of them already creating it for you. So main.c is just going to be an empty template with a main function in it. Remember, the main function is the entry point. After you have the main.c file, you are going to need to edit it. And as I mentioned, you need to create some variables, and the variables have to be of type double. So you should at least create a couple variables for height and width of type double, and you should initialize them. Initialize means that you set an initial value to them. You can initialize things using the equals operator. You end it with semicolon. You will want to initialize this to anything you want, something useful. We are not getting input from the user for this program, but you could, if you wanted to, if you felt comfortable, you could pass in command line arguments. But I didn't think that you guys are already for them that yet. So you can just hard code the variables to anything 50, 100, 23.5, 92.7. Remember, they are double, so they can contain decimals. But you can just hard code these variables to a particular value. And as far as the other variables, the perimeter and area values, those are going to be calculated So you don't want to assign any data to them hard code. You can just initialize them too. And then later in the program, you can assign values to them based on your calculation. So here is the code that you would use for the perimeter calculations and the area calculations. If you created two variables of type double named perimeter and area, all you would need to do is say equals to calculate the perimeter 2.0 times height plus width inside parenthesis ending with a semicolon. To calculate the area, you would just assign area variable, use the equal symbol, equal operator width, and then asterisk 4 times the then height and then the semicolon. So you can copy and paste the perimeter and area of things right here in your program. After you have declared and initialized all your variables, this is really the only logic of the program. Just do a couple of calculations. After we have done those calculations, you then want to display the value of the two parameters or two variables. Perimeter and area and also height and width you should display as well. So you are going to need to use the printf function. And you are going to have to use the correct format specified to display the required output. Format specified for doubles I mentioned is %f. So you want to use that. You can play around with it as well and use like %f2 to see how the precision changes for the number of decimal points. And again, use meaningful names for everything. After you are done doing that, you should compile and link and then test, run the program. And again, play around with this program. Try different things. Try changing variables, data types. Try printing out different variables. Using different data types. Format specifier. That's it. If you're feeling really ambitious, add command line argument to the program. Command line arguments. And the command line arguments could be the width and the height. Read those in from the main function. And use those to do more calculations for perimeter and area. And again, in our previous thing, I gave you the code width and height. I'm assuming that you created two variables called height and width, or lowercase, or else this code would not work. Those are common names for this actual functionality. So that's about it. Again, I will provide another demonstration of how you complete this program along with the source code. So good luck. And lastly, also don't forget to analyze the output. I want to help you guys learn all about enums. So let's take a look at a challenge for enums. So in this challenge, I want you to create a C program that defines an enum type and uses that type to display the values of some variables. Remember, enums are awesome because you can create your own type and you can say this type is only going to have these certain values that can be assigned to it. We had examples for month where months only had values of January through December. We had an example of gender where you could only assign variables of the type enum gender, male or female, same type of data. But in this code, we want the program to create an enum type named company. And for this enum type, the only valid values are Google, Facebook, Xerox, Yahoo, eBay, Microsoft, all caps. And also the order is important because they represent integers. So it could be the same orders as well. Google should be first, Facebook second, and so forth. So we are going to create this enum type because that's the first thing you do with enums. You create the type and then you can use the type. After we have created the enum type called company, we then want to actually create the three variables of this type. And we want to assign these three variables values of Xerox, Google, and eBay. And then the last thing this program should do is just display the output. Simple program. It's just demonstrating enums. So what we need to do here is we need to use the printout function. Display output. We should display the values of those three variables that we created. And we should also use a new line so that it's easy to read. Essentially, the output would be, if we printed out Xerox, Google, eBay variables, would be something like, now you can actually put something before those integers. So they are meaningful, something like the value of Xerox is 2, the value of Google is 0, the value of eBay is 4. Now, why are those values 204 because those are integers. Remember, enums are represented integers in C. Those are the integers of the order of the declarations in the list. So Xerox is 2. Google is 0. Remember that Google was the first one in the list. And the list start at 0. So Google 0, Facebook 1, Xerox 2, Yahoo 3, eBay 4, Microsoft 5. And that's why it prints out 204. Those are the requirements. That's what I want you to try to accomplish. So some hints, you are going to have to first define that enum type and its values. So what you are going to need to do is use an enum keyword. You are going to need to use the squiggly brackets for the valid values. You are going to have to declare and initialize three variables. The way that you declare an enum type is just use the enum followed by the name. And then you can assign values using the equal operator. And then you need to use printf to display the value of the enum variable. We are getting pretty good at the printf, so this should not be too bad. We'll need to use the format specifier. Since the enums are ints, we can just use %d. We'll also want to add this escape sequence to make the output more readable, \n, and that's it. That's